Hi. So our chapter 4 is Canada's rising military spending undermines women, the environment, peace, and security. UN Women's Research 2022 reports that the impact of militarization on gender inequality found that militarization leads to gender inequality, which in turn affects economic growth. Higher military spending reduces the productive capacity of the economy in the long run by exacerbating gender inequality. The report also explained that military spending comes at the expense of investment in social spending programs, which leads to greater poverty. Article 26 of the UN Charter requires UN members to maintain international peace and security with the least diversion for armaments of the world's human and economic resources. Since the adoption of Resolution 1325, Western governments, including Canada, have dramatically increased their military budgets to record levels, not upholding their commitments to women, peace, and security. Global military expenditures have increased to over 2.7 trillion US dollars. At the 2025 NATO summit, Canada, without public consultations, agreed to the NATO Defense Investment Pledge to boost military spending annually to 5% of the GDP by 2035. This will mean a rise in military spending to 150 billion annually, with an additional 106 billion per year on the CIF. The federal government's 2024 statement and impacts report on gender diversity and inclusion acknowledged that investments in the military disproportionately benefit men over women. The budget for the Department of National Defense, including CAF, was 33 billion. The Department for Women, Gender and Youth wage was only 71 million. The reduction of WADE's meager budget will be devastating to women and youth, as well as to the 2S LGBTQIA+ and Indigenous programs. Canadians also call out the shameful government lack of action on the recommendations on the Commission for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and in Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Canada has never met its pledge to spend 0.7% of gross national income on overseas development and assistance, despite its feminist international assistance policy. Daily, we watch women and the 2S LGBTQIA++ being slaughtered in Gaza, Sudan, and other parts of the world. Laws to protect us, even in Canada, are being torn up. Under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Government of Canada committed to improve the lives of women, girls, 2S LGBTQIA+, First Nations, seniors, and people living with disabilities. Wilf calls on the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, and members of Parliament to prioritize investments described in Building Understanding, the first report on the National Advisory Council on Poverty, over meeting NATO's dangerous GDP target. We want peaceful coexistence, not war. Military spending also comes at a severe cost to the climate and the environment. The Canadian government is procuring new fossil fuel-powered fighter jets, attack helicopters, armed drones, missile launchers, and armored vehicles that release excessive carbon emissions and air pollutants. Wilf Canada's 2024 research shows that military expenditures and emissions are hindering the federal government from rapidly decarbonizing and achieving Paris agreements. In September 2025, the UN Secretary General released an important report, The Security We Need, Rebalancing Military Spending for a Sustainable and Peaceful Future, raising alarms for ever-rising military expenditures and urging states to reconceive security based on human needs, not militarism. It stressed that the climate change targets and sustainable development goals are not on track because of inadequate financial resources. It called on all countries to address the underlying causes of growing military expenditures and instead prioritize diplomacy, peace, and international cooperation. To achieve the goals of Women, Peace, and Security agenda, the Women of Canada call on the federal government to act on the UN recommendations to reduce and redirect military spending to a green, intersectional care, and peace-based economy. I'd like to thank everyone who's been part of developing this really dynamite and critically important document at this time in the situation we all face in the world. And Canada's responsibility.